Institute of Medicine defines patient-centered care as providing care that is respectful of and responsive to individual patient preferences, needs, and values, and ensuring that patient values guide all clinical decisions. What are the benefits of engaging people at all levels of healthcare with the goal of improving healthcare systems to a more patient and family-centered approach to care? This is episode 23 of Pep Talks, the Patient Engagement Podcast. In this episode, recorded in the summer of 2020, we speak with Dr. Gail MacKean, who is a parent of a child with complex medical needs and a health services researcher. Gail shares her experiences and perspectives as a parent, as an academic qualitative researcher, and as a member of Imagine Citizens. Paul Ferry first asked Gail how COVID-19 has affected her work.
Okay, well, I'll talk about two things there. I'll talk about first my, my volunteer work as a member of the Imagine community. So I'm deeply involved in an organization called Imagine Citizens Collaborating for Health. And that work, because we're kind of a virtual community-based organization, do a lot of our work anyway, because we have people from across the province. We're often working in an online or telephone format. I don't think it's affected that work directly so much, other than it's refocused our attention on some issues related to COVID-19. Kind of a bit of a long story. And one of them is, of course, trying to figure out what does a community-based organization like Imagine, what can we do in this COVID-19 world that we're living in? And so we've been talking a little bit about that as a community. Anyway, so that's one of the things. And I guess, yeah, I don't know if I want to say any more about that at the Imagine side. In terms of my other more paid work side, and I do part of that paid work. I do work a lot with patient partners in research because I'm a health services researcher, and my expertise is in qualitative research methods. And I found my way to doing this work through my own personal experience in the healthcare system. So I sometimes refer to myself as a patient researcher. I'm a parent of a young adult now born with really complex medical problems. So I've had a lot of experience working in the advocating for her in the healthcare system, and also working as a patient advisor and patient partner and those kinds of things in my past life. But anyway, as a health services researcher, my expertise is, as I said, is primarily qualitative research methods. And I found that the COVID-19 has affected the work that I'm able to do. I'm working with various groups on research projects. The projects where we've already collected the data, so we usually collect data by doing interviews and or focus groups with people. That's the main kind of data collection used in qualitative research. It's talking to people. It has slowed down some of the work. It depends on where the work is at and the population of people. So if we're still in the data collection phase, i.e. we're still interviewing people, or we were just about to start to interview people, some of that's actually got slowed down in some populations because people are actually more busy, surprisingly. And one population I can think of, because I've got two projects where I'm working with a team on youth with juvenile inflammatory arthritis and their parents, and the parent group tends to be very busy because many of them are working from home now, plus homeschooling, plus
Oh yeah, I know.
So they're very, very busy. So sometimes when we reach out to those people, they say, can you reconnect with me in July? So I think that is an issue that we really need to pay attention to, that where I think we sometimes assume that people are trapped at home and they don't have anything to do, but I think that really varies a lot.
Oh, for sure.
And I know other populations of people who may be in that caregiver role for older parents, and who either may be living with them or may be in the community and they're supporting them in another way. And that group of people also can be very busy. So the projects where we've already collected the data and we're now in the data analysis and writing stage, those projects can continue. And I don't think they're being hugely affected by COVID-19. But again, depending who's on your research team and the kind of home situation, personal situation they're in, they may not be working at 100% for all the reasons we've just discussed.
Oh, for sure,
yeah.
Yeah. Have you heard anything more generally from the patient-oriented research or patient engagement communities about some of the effects?
No, I haven't really. I did reach out because I did reach out to another patient research partner that I know of who is a parent of who again is in that role of being a parent of a child with really complex needs. Just saying, what was their thoughts about even reaching out to people at this time, given that they may have so much on their plates? And again, it's that question. It's the same old adage of being really. It's really important when you're approaching people, even if I'm a patient research partner approaching other patients to participate in research, that you're very mindful that people, you don't know people's personal situations. So you need to be very, very open about whether this is something they can do now, and not just assuming that they have the time to participate in your research, which I think is the same regardless of when we're doing research as patient researchers, but really, really important for at this particular period of time. And I think the same would hold true for your expectations if you were a researcher working with patient research partners, that you need to recognize that their situation may have changed. So you need to be really flexible about, being careful about what you expect them to be able to do during this period. For example, the example I just provided, if, someone on your research team is a parent of a child with complex needs, and obviously their school is closed, that person is now providing 100% of the care for that child. It's going to take up a lot of their time.
Oh, yeah,
anyway. Yeah, I think that with COVID-19, it's as we all know, it's changed a lot, changed a lot of aspects of people's lives. And depending on those people, who those people are and what their lives look like, it could make them, really create a lot of less flexibility in their lives or more flexibility. So we have to be flexible as research teams to respond to those needs, both, for our patient partners that we're working with as researchers, and for the people we're inviting to participate in our research projects as research participants, like participate in interviews, focus groups, complete surveys, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, there'll be an interesting and terrible, almost certainly, inequity, I think, around the types of, I'm thinking some journals have made a rapid review process available to submit articles right now. The people who will be able to submit those will be a very select subset of people.
Yes.
And it's going to be really difficult for, I think, universities to deal with things like that.
And also, reaching out, if you are in the point in your research project, say you've got a team of researchers, including patient partners on your team, and you're at the point where, you really wanted to get started on doing the interviews or focus groups or send out the survey. I think you have to be very mindful of whether some people are going to be able to respond.
Yeah. No,
and some aren't, right? So it may skew your example. If you're talking about a survey, or if you're talking about doing qualitative work, you might not get the same kind of variation in your participation.
Oh, yeah.
Diversity of your participants because of the different situations people find themselves in. So I think we need to be really mindful.
Yeah. I mean, for our projects, we found either we get a ludicrously immediate response. We're like, oh, I didn't even expect that right now. Or, nothing.
Yeah. No, I know.
Which is fine.
Course,
I mean,
yeah. I think it's important too, I've gotten some requests where some people aren't even acknowledging, it's just work as normal. I don't think we can go in with that. I think when we're reaching out, we have to say something like, we recognize this is we're living in a very different kind of a world right now, and many people's lives have changed a lot. And, we're reaching out because we want to continue to do this research, but,
Oh, no. I mean, I think it took me about 2 weeks to get a home office set up that worked acceptably.
Yeah, exactly. So you even know, it's not like suddenly you turn a switch and everything is just as easy to do at home as it was before. That may not be the case at all.
Yeah, no. This world of patient engagement and patient-oriented research.
I'll speak first, just more general world of patient engagement. I have a very long time interest in patient engagement. I am a parent of now a young adult daughter born with very complex medical problems, and she's now almost 29. And I got very involved. Now, this is more than 25 years ago now, at the Alberta Children's Hospital in Calgary, sitting on what they called their Community Advisory Committee, which then evolved into something called the Family Liaison Council. But it was basically working a very long time ago in that role as a patient advisor. And in this case, of course, a parent advisor, because we're talking about parents. So that was my real first foray into the world of being engaged as a patient, or in my case, a parent, in health system improvement. And I became very keenly interested in, our whole committee at that time became very keenly interested in this very new idea, new concept about at this time, which is now, again, more than 25 years ago, this concept of patient and family-centered care, which was being talked about, but really at the very early stages. And that, so that was really my first involvement in that. And that led to my interest in that whole concept of patient family-centered care. And I think my understanding of that concept is that working in collaboration with patients and caregivers, both in their own care or their family members' care, and at the service and system level. So not only as partners in developing their own healthcare plan and what's going to work for them and their family, but also as partners in developing services that work better for people. Of course, research that also contributes to doing things in a way that works better for people, both improving their experience with the healthcare system, but also, optimally improving their health outcomes and their well-being outcomes. Yeah. So I got involved, very long time ago in that kind of a role. And then because of my interest in the concept of patient family-centered care, and I wanted to go back to school, I decided to go back to, and I went back to school here at the University of Calgary in the Cummings School of Medicine's Department of Community Health Sciences, and I did my doctoral research in that general area of health services research. And my topic was family-centered care in pediatrics, and I did a qualitative research project.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think then I was a patient researcher.
Yes.
There you go.
For sure, yeah. Yes, so you have a really interesting perspective, I think, as both a health services researcher and kind of a patient-family partner on projects and on various advisory committees. Could you maybe think about with me some of the similarities and differences between those two worlds that you exist in?
Yes, well, that's a good question. I don't know if this is answering your question, Paul, but it might help to, so starting from the very beginning, when I first went back to do my PhD and started doing my doctoral research on that whole topic of family-centered care, it was, I often felt I was switching hats or wearing multiple hats, because I got interested in that topic because of my experience as a parent supporting their child in a very complex healthcare system. And I was really intrigued about this concept of patient and family-centered care. Because of the time I was doing that research, which was actually right when folks in Calgary were planning for a new children's hospital. So they were doing the planning for the new children's hospital, because this would have been 1999, 2000, 2001. I defended in 2001. I got asked I was invited to be part of the strategic planning team for the new children's hospital as a parent / health services researcher with expertise in patient and family-centered care. So it was really hard sometimes to divide those, right? So I had to be, it was a little bit of an interpretive dance in terms of when to draw on my experience as a parent when I was describing, when I was sitting in some of those planning meetings, and when to draw on my experience as an academic and researcher with more academic expertise in the concept of patient and family-centered care. So I don't know if that answers the question, what was the same and what was different, because they were so intertwined. but I have always found that to be challenging. Anyway, I don't know whether.
Oh no, for sure. Like it's a really it's a sort of an interesting two worlds to sort of straddle.
It is, and I feel in my experience, particularly, and I think I began to learn this when I was doing my doctoral research, is that the lens that I was able to bring to my work as a parent of a child with complex medical issues was incredibly valuable during my data collection and analysis. Like, I honestly think that I may not, particularly in the data now, first of all, in the data collection, because I did both interviews and focus groups, I think my personal experience and my ability to be able to relate to what parents were telling me about their experiences really helped me ask the right kinds of questions and follow up in ways that were quite intuitive in terms of sub-questions and areas to pursue, etc. Anyway, so I think that was really valuable. And then when it came to the data analysis part, again, I think that if I hadn't had the kinds of experiences I'd had as a parent, I might not have been able to even see some of the things or have any hooks. It's like having a hook. To be able to understand something. And one example is one of my supervisor for that research was a feminist scholar. And so she used a feminist lens, a framework when she was looking at data. And I remember when I was working with her and she was working with me on my data analysis, she could pick out things that from a feminist lens that I couldn't even see. And I think the same kind of thing happened. I mean, I brought that personal experience as a parent lens, and I could see things she couldn't see because of that. Yeah. And so I thought it was really cool. And it really made me realize the importance of engaging with patients as partners in your research. This is before we'd ever thought of that. I mean, I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, which was running off to my colleagues on on the parent advisory committee I was sitting on and saying, could you read this interview guide? Does this work? I practiced my interviews on them, but I couldn't really include that in my methods because that would have been like, no, right?
Would have been a bit wild, I think, for the time, maybe.
A bit wild. So it's really interesting to see how that's evolved over time. And even sitting down with some of my, when I was doing some of my analysis and talking through some of the things I was struggling with my parent friends, because I really appreciated their lenses, right? Yeah. But that wasn't something you did back then because I was doing a PhD and I was supposed to be doing it by myself. Yeah.
Oh, no, nobody ever does them by themselves, I don't think, ultimately.
But in the olden days, I think they used to think that. Yeah. So I just did that almost naturally, but it wasn't something that was, I would say supported.
So maybe thinking about, maybe we'll just have one hat at a time now. And think about maybe some projects you've been involved in as a family and a patient and family partner. Do you want to just maybe tell me about a project that you've been involved in, like, and what your role was and how you think the process went?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I think that's hard for me to do now, Paul, in terms of research projects, because I have not been involved in any research projects as a patient partner. I've been involved with them in them more as a health services researcher who's bringing with them a patient lens to their work. Okay. So I don't know how I could, I don't know how to answer that question because I can answer kind of a related question, which is, after being a health services researcher and doing my doctorate in the area of patient and family-centered care way back, and this would have been about 15 years ago now, not quite 15, about that, anyway, more than 10 years ago, when there were still health regions in the province, the Calgary Health Region decided to develop a focus on patient experience. So they had a department called Patient Experience, and I was invited to do some consulting work to help them sort of some of the conceptual underpinnings. Well, what does patient and family-centered care look like in a health system? What kinds of structures and processes, policies, et cetera, do we need to set? Do we need to put in place to really practice and in that way, to support that kind of approach or model to care. And I got invited to sit a couple of times. People asked me to sit as a parent. So I was doing that work as a consultant. And then they say, oh, could you come and sit as a patient on X, Y, or Z committee as an advisor? And I actually found that really difficult to do, because I found it really hard to take off my health services researcher hat and put on just a patient or a parent hat. And I also used to get, to be honest, I would sometimes get a little angry because of the way the committees or the task forces or things I was asked to participate or conferences attend wearing a patient hat at that time. Because the adult system was just trying to get into this, I found a lot of it very tokenistic in terms of how they were inviting parents to get involved or patients to get involved. And I just had a hard time with it, because my sense was that they wanted us to be sitting on those committees, but they didn't really want to listen. And they didn't really believe they had a lot of value in terms of what we were contributing. It was like that time where it truly was a lot of rubber stamping. Oh, we've got a patient or parent sitting on this committee. Check. Yeah. So I developed a very, I decided that after a few invitations to do those kinds of things, I began to say, I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
No.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that anymore. And that was before the whole area of engaging patients in research had even taken off. But I think some of those challenges still exist, regardless of what you're, quotes, inviting patients to get involved or engaged in. It's not real.
Yeah. Now let's maybe talk about some of the work that you do with a group called Imagine. So what is Imagine? Like how did that come about? Like how did you get involved in that sort of thing?
Okay, yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. So I've been involved, this has been going on for more than 5 years. And how my involvement started is I got involved with a few people in the community who'd both, had experience working in the health system as either a researcher or a healthcare provider or some sort of planner, or just some knowledge of the healthcare system and kind of how it works, and had some role in it. But also it had deep personal experiences with the healthcare system. And I'd say the group of us really thought that kind of knowledge and experience that patients, family members, caregivers bring is so valuable, and that it's like we don't even, as people working in the healthcare system, we don't realize what we're missing. It's like we're partly blind when we're trying to design research or plan services for patients, because we don't have that knowledge and expertise that patients who use these services bring to the table or live with health conditions. And I personally, because of kind of like that experience I just talked about, was I have to say it fed up with the idea of being a patient advisor, being invited to tables, inside the healthcare system or the research system. At that time, it was mainly the healthcare system, where they set the agendas. They decided how to involve you, when to involve you, whether you were the right person to involve. And we thought there was a role for more of a people in the community coming together to form an organization or a group, informal organization, where we all had this interest. We all had expertise as patients or family members. And just because a little core of us had also had experience with the healthcare system, we invited others in who didn't have that kind of experience as well. It was really like anyone who had a real interest in working as true partners with people in the health system, whether it's around quality improvement, research, policy, patients, like a patient organization as a partner to the table, as opposed to, dividing and conquering us. And also, I think is related to that, I think important that a community-based organization of patients, citizen, people, whatever you want to call us, who have a deep interest in our healthcare system and contributing to making it as good as it can be, and working with our healthcare professional partners to do that, that sometimes we get to set the agenda and invite those partners to our table rather than just going to their tables. So it's more of a equal playing field as opposed to who has the power and the influence. Of course, we're still a long way from that.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah.
But that's why we thought it was important to have a sort of a citizen-led organization that was not has partnerships with key organizations like the Patient Engagement Platform, like the O'Brien Institute for Public Health, like the Health Quality Council of Alberta, like whatever, but not be subservient to them.
Yeah, no. So what kind of projects does Imagine do then? Maybe just like if you have one or two examples of.
Sure. Yeah. Well, one of the things, and this was one of our earliest projects that we worked on, and that started now probably about 4 years ago, is that we had a real interest in Imagine. We recognized that there were many people, we thought there were many people who had an interest in health and their healthcare system, but maybe didn't feel like they had a lot of confidence in in their own knowledge and experience. And this is in part because I think in healthcare we have a very strong expert model, and how we define expertise is quite narrow. And so I don't think that many people who've had a lot of experience navigating and advocating for themselves and using healthcare services often thought that they had that kind of knowledge and experience was very valuable. So they didn't have confidence in that experience. So one of the things, and so we thought, well, what is one of the things that we could do as Imagine to try and help people discover that they have this knowledge and experience and build their own confidence and ability. And some people might use the term find their voice. I personally think it's more than voice. I think it means understanding that the knowledge and experience they bring is incredibly valuable, and then bring voice to that. So we approached the SCNs at the time and asked them whether they would be interested in, got talking about this, and they were also very interested in this concept. I think back then we were using the term building capacity, but I think we've moved on from that to think that people have a lot of capacity. They just need to discover it, and we need to help them feel more confident and, so that they can use that knowledge and experience to have more influence. So that project, which was initially called Healthcare 101, we thought we really did try to use a co-design approach by inviting many patient, citizens, people in Alberta who were interested in this idea to come together and talk about what they would want to learn. And it turns out that we thought they would want to learn how to be more effective influencers as patient advisors or working with Imagine or whatever. But they said what they really wanted initially to build their own confidence in was their understanding of how our healthcare system works, because it's very complex, how to even advocate for themselves in the system and their family members or people close to them in their communities, and how to navigate the system. So the first foray in Healthcare 101 was really trying to build that kind of learning modules for people so that they could develop a better understanding of their own healthcare system. And that was co-designed with citizens. That's one project. And now that project's evolving, but I don't want to take a lot of time talking about that. And another project that we've done more recently, for example, is, again, this is an example of, I think, inviting our health system partners to work to bring together people in Alberta to talk about a topic that's of importance to us. And one of the topics was, from the very beginning, being very interested in, well, what kinds of health and healthcare outcomes matter to Albertans. So a member of Imagine, Judy Birdsall, who's our board chair, decided it would be a good idea to apply for a Campus Alberta grant and approached our SPORE Patient Engagement Platform partners and the Health Quality Council of Alberta and asked them whether they would be interested in working with on that. And so we worked together with the three organizations. I'd say worked together equally, and we hosted a workshop where we brought together over, I guess, about a day and a half, a large group, a fairly large group, more than 20 quotes, patients, people, and then as well as some health system people to talk about, first of all, what outcomes matter to citizens, what kinds of outcomes are we currently measuring, and how might we tackle that a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
That was a recent project. So I think that's 2 examples.
Oh yeah, no, it's it's great. So we talked about sort of the health services research perspective and the patient, family, advisor, and partner perspective, and a little bit about the community perspective. But maybe let's talk about that a little bit more around what kind of maybe value, and maybe that's not the right word, but what kind of benefits do you think this community-based approach has to the world of involving patients in all sorts of aspects, from research to their own care to everything?
Yeah. No, thanks, Paul. I think that's a really important question, and I'm not sure I have a really great, succinct answer. And I think I talked about it a little bit in the answer to the previous question, but I think one of the things that's really important about taking a true community-based approach, and I think we have there is some precedence here in this whole area of participatory action research or community action research, where rather than going into a community and inviting them to be involved in your research, you go to a community, and it can be a geographic community. It can be like a community of like another community could be, people living with multiple sclerosis. There's many different ways to define community, that we truly reach out and have the community, invite the community to help set the agenda about what's important to talk about. And I think that's important in both engaging communities in improving our health and healthcare, and also in research. So for example, the example I gave about the workshop on outcomes, on health outcomes that matter to Albertans, I mean, that was a topic that was important to us as citizens, patients, people, and we invited others to our table rather than responding to the agenda, being invited to their table to talk about a topic they'd already defined. I think this is really important in health services research, an area. I think one of the most important areas that we need to do a much better job of involving patients, communities, and depending on the kind of research it is, communities, of going out and saying, what are the things we should even be researching? What are the kinds of research questions? I mean, you can't go, what's going to make a difference in your life, your community's life? We need to start at the very beginning. That doesn't mean we can't go out and invite patients to be involved in a research project we've already conceptualized and developed and blah. But I think it's way more powerful if you can get out there early and work with communities and people, patients, to develop the research question. What's going to make a difference? And I realize that our research funding system has to change to fund that kind of activity. It's very hard for researchers to do that, but I think that'll be a huge, big next step. And in terms of the health services research community doing more research that will actually make a difference to people and their lives. Anyway, and I think another thing is by going to the community early and by sort of supporting community grassroots organizations who have ideas about the kind of topics they want to talk about in terms of health services improvement or research, is that it really, I think, is a great way of supporting communities and people to what I talked about before, discover that they actually do have a lot of valuable knowledge and experience. So they discover, they discover and become more confident in their knowledge and their ability to influence. So I think you need to build that kind of community capacity in the community. We don't build it; they build it. We support them to build it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So maybe one final question around. I always like to ask people for advice. So what advice would you have for somebody listening who's never been involved as a patient advisor or patient partner in research or any of that? What advice would you give to them if they were interested in getting involved?
I think that's a really great question too, Paul. And I think for me, what I learned, I go back to what I learned really early on when I was sitting on that first community or parent advisory committee at the Children's Hospital 25 years ago. What I so valued about that was, what I wrote down was hang out and learn from your patient peers. So really, I learned so much from those other parents sitting around the table, and we learned together. So it was forming that constituency. If you're interested, so joining a community like Imagine, where there's others who have a common interest, so you can talk about things together and say, if I was sitting as a quote patient partner on someone's research project, I could come back to my folks and say, hey, this is something we're discussing X, Y, and Z on this research team. I'd really like to talk to you about some of these ideas. What do you think about this? So that this helps you build your confidence that what you want to say is important and it's a view shared by others, not just you. And I think the other thing is try not to get isolated. I know you're working with the other researchers on the team, but you also want to be sure you're working and connecting with other patient partners or patient advisors who are playing similar roles so that you keep true to your roots. Yeah. So finding time to have conversations with others who are patients, community members. Yeah, so you don't get just totally sucked into the research world. I know I have to do that a lot myself. So, find lots of opportunities to connect with other patients who are playing similar roles or people in your community who are playing similar roles, however you like to label yourself. And keep learning from each other and supporting each other.
For sure. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast.
You're so welcome.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Pep Talks, the Patient Engagement Podcast, brought to you by the Alberta Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research Patient Engagement Team. Special thanks to Paul Ferry, Sadia Ahmed, and Sandra Zielinski, and our summer students Sarah, Sydney, and Stella for their co-production. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you found it, and we hope you'll join us again for more interesting discussions about patient engagement in health research and healthcare.